JoyBoy's name was first revealed immediately following the time skip when Robin read the Poneglyph in the sea forest on Fishman Island. It's no small coincidence Oda introduced this enigmatic figure just before the Straw Hat's voyage in the New World began, as the one who rediscovers One Piece is meant to symbolically represent his return. The concrete details about JoyBoy revealed at this point are few and far between, but his codename or epithet was first introduced to readers through his apology letter to Shirahoshi's predecessor, which underscores the fact that understanding and reconciling JoyBoy's primordial failing is the paramount responsibility of his eventual successor. The name JoyBoy is only known to the select few who have read the Poneglyphs, which means the world government has successfully erased all traces of his existence from the pages of history. Yet his will was inherited by Gold Roger, the first in 800 years to rediscover the tale of his voyage left behind on the final island. And now that Luffy has reawakened Nika's power, the future Pirate King is poised to do the same. From this we can discern that JoyBoy was a figure who defined the entire lost epoch of history, and that his legend is inherently tied to the Poneglyphs and the One Piece itself. Simply put, I believe JoyBoy was the first forgotten Pirate King.
You don't have to say wow, I know it's wow.
There are numerous reasons why I believe this to be the case, but it's important to remember that ultimately, this tale takes place in a world of pirates. It thus stands to reason that the central figure of the world's forgotten past was himself a pirate in the same mold as Roger and Luffy. I would like to first direct your attention to a passage included in one of the extra pages in the first volume of the series. A narration box accompanying a color illustration of Shanks, Buggy, and other silhouetted pirates reads, "It was an age burning with the magnificence of those searching for the treasure of treasures. One Piece, hidden by Gold Roger, history's only king of pirates. It was an age when pirates beyond number raised their flags to battle for fame and fortune. It was a golden age." As far as history is concerned, no one was ever declared Pirate King before Roger. This statement would at first glance seem to dismiss any notion that a previous Pirate King preceded Goldie Roger, if not for the fact that this story takes place in a world where a significant chapter of history has been erased. Referring to history's only anything in a world where a chapter of history has been erased is immediately suspect and suggests another may have once existed and been forgotten. But this isn't our only clue that there was another Pirate King before Roger. The best evidence that JoyBoy was a pirate in the same mold as Roger and Luffy can be found in the lyrics to the song Bank Sake, which, as I have detailed in previous videos, in part tells the tale of JoyBoy's voyage. It describes a crew of pirates beset by tumultuous seas whose faith must be placed in the morning sun, a new dawn which will eventually rise. JoyBoy could have been a pirate, an adventurer, any number of things, but the mention of the Jolly Roger strongly indicates the flag of piracy indeed sailed from his mast. The song clearly describes a group of pirates and refers to proudly sailing the Jolly Roger, so if indeed this song describes JoyBoy, then he must have been a pirate. There's one more interesting detail to note. The song alludes to all sailing toward the end of the sea. Now this is interesting because in the current great age of pirates, Roger's words inspired the world to pursue the treasure One Piece. But in chapter 966, Roger indicated that the legend of the great treasure on the final island preceded him, as this is what motivated his own circumnavigation of the globe. It's natural to assume JoyBoy is the one who left behind One Piece, but it's important to pay careful attention to Roger's exact words in chapter 967. While it's certainly possible JoyBoy is the one who placed One Piece at the end of the Grand Line, Roger doesn't outright confirm this. In this scene, the former Pirate King says, "Oh JoyBoy, I wish I'd been born in your time. This is quite a treasure you've left behind, a tale full of laughs." So notice, Roger does say JoyBoy left behind quite a treasure, which could be referring to One Piece itself, but then he quickly follows that statement with the phrase, "a tale full of laughs," which perhaps indicates JoyBoy's contribution to the great treasure was simply his story. That isn't to say the treasure itself is the story, but I'm suggesting One Piece may be older still than JoyBoy and something he too discovered like Roger. What remains unclear is why JoyBoy and many others would have been sailing toward the final island during the Void Century. Luffy is seeking Laugh Tale because of the legend of One Piece. Roger was seeking the final island because of an even older legend of a lost treasure. But what inspired JoyBoy? What was he hoping to find? It's possible that no such prompting was necessary. The allure of the unknown, the romance of adventure, and the promise of being the first in history to attain the unattainable could have been all that was required.
Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory.
George Mallory, an English mountaineer who took part in the first 3 expeditions to Mount Everest, is famously quoted as having said, when asked why he sought to climb the world's tallest mountain, "Because it's there." Oda, Roger, and Luffy all embarked with similar motivation, to discover what exists on the infinite horizon. This innate desire is what conducted them from their ordinary, familiar lives onto the fantastical road of adventure. But what truly qualifies them as heroes is that they recognized and responded to the call of destiny. The first leg of Odin's voyage with Whitebeard was carefree and aimless, but he later changed teams and sailed with Roger with a decided purpose. I don't think we can say anything for certain at this point, but based on the evidence, JoyBoy may have undertaken a voyage similar in nature to Roger and Luffy. We must ask whether he too was searching for something at the end of the sea. So could the treasure One Piece be as old as the Grand Line itself? Nothing yet refutes this possibility. Roger indicated the treasure JoyBoy left behind was his tale full of laughs, and thus it's possible One Piece was simply discovered by JoyBoy in similar fashion to Roger. If JoyBoy is indeed made from the same mold as Luffy and Roger, then perhaps he too was transformed by his voyage. After seeing and understanding the world and discovering the One Piece, he developed a vision for a world transformed, which could only be realized by the King of Pirates. Okay, so JoyBoy was the first pirate king, but what is a king without a kingdom? And what type of kingdom would befit a king of pirates? Well, it just so happens a forgotten kingdom rose to prominence and was destroyed during the Void Century, not so coincidentally referred to as JoyBoy's era. The fact that the Sea Circle was seemingly created 600 years before JoyBoy's era indicates it had a purpose in guiding the world toward freedom before the cataclysmic war of the Void Century and the rise of the world government. My assertion is that the sea dragon deity potentially revered on Fishman Island, Wano, and Alabasta was responsible for directing the Grand Line's creation and thus perhaps also originated the legend of the treasure at the end of the sea. Perhaps the Grand Line was originally created to raise up a leader capable of guiding the world toward liberty, and JoyBoy was the first to arrive at this mythic location, the first to boast the title Pirate King, and the first to envision a world transformed. But how did JoyBoy try to change the world, and what did he envision? Why did the world demand a champion of freedom in an era which preceded the formation of the world government? The reign of the Lunarians might have ended in year 0, but the red wall dividing the world's oceans didn't fall at that time, and as such, whether or not there was a centralized oppressive force in the world, there was nevertheless an imperative for change. And that's exactly what I believe JoyBoy was trying to accomplish as the first pirate king. But here we need to understand what piracy means in the world of One Piece. What does it mean to be the king of pirates, and why is this monarch the only one who can bring about the type of change the world requires?
I am the pirate king, and it is a glorious thing to be a pirate king.
Oda's author comments from the opening page of Volume 1 are potentially revealing. In order to write a story of pirates, I've been gathering a lot of sources on pirates and reading them, but none state of a pirate who dreamed of becoming one in their young days. Seems like they were having so much fun that they forgot to mention themselves in history. Gosh, this is why pirates are such a pain. This is essentially a lighthearted remark about pirates' negligence in recording tales of their voyage, making Oda's task of doing research more difficult, but also grants us some important insight into Oda's creative process by revealing the original seed of an idea which grew into this massive pirate epic, a young boy who dreams of piracy. This is unusual, because piracy is not traditionally viewed as a virtue worth aspiring towards. The more familiar bloodthirsty cutthroats which populate past pirate stories are present in the world of One Piece, but represent a moral antithesis to the central protagonists. This reminds me of a quote from Stephen King's book On Writing, a memoir of the craft. In discussing the origin or source of his inspiration for his novels, he states the following: I get my ideas from everywhere, but what all of my ideas boil down to is seeing maybe one thing, but in a lot of cases it's seeing two things, and having them come together in some new and interesting way, and then adding the question, what if? What if is always the key question. In Volume 2, Oda discusses his childhood love of a cartoon called Vicky the Viking, which contributed to his interest in telling a seafaring adventure story when he grew older. Oda gathered a lot of sources on pirates in preparation for writing One Piece, but the story really distinguishes itself from others which tackle similar subject matter by injecting an atypical protagonist. In the world of One Piece, Roger's final words served as a call to adventure, an inciting incident for people around the world. Oda wanted to create a story about a young person who dreamed of becoming a pirate. This was the spark, the what if, which resulted in the original premise for the story of One Piece. What could spur not only one young person, but the entire world to dream of piracy? The death of the Pirate King and the mystery of the legendary treasure One Piece were the narrative answer. The creation of One Piece can thus be characterized as the collision of two ideas: a seafaring adventure story filled with pirates in search of lost treasure, and a coming-of-age hero's journey for a young, good-natured protagonist who dreams of becoming the king of pirates. To reconcile an idealistic hero like Luffy with the traditionally sordid world of pirates, Oda created a world where piracy may be considered an ideal, even a necessity. a world where the societal structure has tilted toward tyranny, and thus breaking from said institutions by becoming an outlaw may be seen as noble or virtuous if the freedom such liberation entails is used for the betterment and protection of others.
Perhaps on the rare occasion pursuing the right course demands an act of piracy. Piracy itself can be the right course.
Piracy in the world of One Piece is a representation of freedom from the constraints of ordinary society, an act which may be seen as a moral imperative in a world governed by an oppressive force.
It's how you look at buccaneers that makes them bad or good. And I see us as members of a noble brotherhood.
Thus, the Pirate King may be understood as the paragon or ultimate champion of freedom. In an epoch of history which predates the current totalitarian regime, it's difficult to say whether piracy as it exists in the One Piece world currently would have been viewed in the same light, whether choosing to wave the Jolly Roger would have signified the same meaning to the world, which is why it was so important we earlier established that the world's primordial oppressor was already at work long before the Void Century. This tells us that JoyBoy, the world's first Pirate King, had something to oppose, and it also demonstrates that Oda has designed his world to accommodate a noble pirate serving as the ultimate force for good, and the hero the age demands. The influence of history, religion, myths, and folklore as sources of inspiration has been a recurrent topic of conversation throughout this video. Oda stated in the first volume that in preparation for writing One Piece, he researched all sorts of pirate stories, and on that note, one particular pirate legend stands out as potential inspiration for JoyBoy and the Forgotten Kingdom, which rose to prominence during the Void Century. There is a utopian myth of a purported pirate colony called Libertalia. This rumored pirate's paradise was said to have been founded by Captain James Mission, sometimes also referred to as Olivier Mission, in Madagascar during the 17th century. Most historians doubt Libertalia actually existed, and thus it is viewed as a utopian legend. The name of this rumored pirate nation comes from the Latin word liberi, which means free, and accordingly, legend said Mission's idea was to create a society in which people of all colors, creeds, and beliefs could live freely under the protection of the pirate lords. In Villains of All Nations, Pirates of the Golden Age, Marcus Rediker described the supposed Libertalian pirates as vigilant guardians of people's rights and liberties, and barriers against the rich and powerful. French pirate James Mission sailed aboard a ship called Victory, and his utopia sailed a white flag instead of a Jolly Roger, united under the phrase "for God and liberty." We know the 20 kings banded together to combat what Clover described as a vast forgotten kingdom which rose to prominence during the Void Century. He went so far as to assert the primary motivation for the erasure of history was to hide the very existence of this nation, and given the prominent role JoyBoy seems to have played in the Void Century era, I believe he may have been the sovereign of a pirate nation patterned on the fabled tale of Libertalia, where he tried to unite the various island nations of the world to fight for freedom. But freedom from what? Remember, JoyBoy's era precedes the world government. The world government and celestial dragons are the form presently assumed by the oppressive force and thus are the enemies Luffy must combat. The world government as it exists presently wasn't around in JoyBoy's era, but its underlying ideology, the desire to stamp out people's freedom, certainly already existed, and that's what JoyBoy attempted to change as the Pirate King. The world before the Void Century was not an idyllic utopia, and thus, the free nation of pirates JoyBoy was trying to create likely represents an incomplete goal or aspiration, which for some reason failed.
Oh, well, I tried to start a revolution but didn't print enough pamphlets, so hardly anyone turned up.
I believe much like Mission's mythic kingdom of Libertalia, JoyBoy flew the flag of piracy to represent freedom. Much like the emperors in the modern era, he proclaimed himself protector of many island nations, and thus the ancient kingdom could be considered a loose affiliation of many nations all around the world. It's even possible JoyBoy considered a particular island the center of his kingdom, so to speak, much like the emperors who each have islands which serve as a sort of capital for their territories. In that sense, perhaps Wano was at the heart of JoyBoy's kingdom based on its deep connection to the sea. Wano is a fountain from which water flows, and it sits on rich deposits of sea stone. We now know for certain that the Forgotten Kingdom possessed advanced technology, but this doesn't necessarily pertain to the ancient Wano now hidden beneath the waves. I proposed Wano was the heart of this Forgotten Kingdom, in the sense that it may have been tied in some special way to JoyBoy and the mythic sea dragon, evidenced by its deposits of sea stone. But that doesn't necessarily imply it would have once been home to the same type of futuristic technology found on Egghead. As I said, it's possible this kingdom extended throughout the entire Grand Line. Inuarashi said Roger reached a realization about the civilization which gave rise to the Poneglyphs on Lodestar Island. So perhaps the Grand Line's natural endpoint is where Vegapunk's Void Century analog brought to life these technological marvels lost to the mists of time. Oden insisted that Wano's borders must be open for JoyBoy's impending return, and while this likely refers to the symbolic arrival of someone like Roger and Luffy who shares in JoyBoy's vision, the use of the term return is interesting. It's no surprise JoyBoy would have once visited Wano, but Kaido insisted this land is special, and Sengoku told Sakazuki it's no small coincidence so many of the world's most famous pirates like Roger, Whitebeard, Oden, Kaido, Big Mom, and now Luffy were somehow connected to Wano. This could even explain the large straw hat hidden away in Imu's vault in Marijua if it was created for a JoyBoy in Amigasa village. Perhaps the hat passed down from Roger to Shanks and from Shanks to Luffy is nothing more than a hero's hat replica of the original. The identical, much larger version hidden in Imu's vault would then be nothing more than an ordinary hat, kept as a memento from Imu's seemingly vanquished foe. Kaido's new Onigashima project intends to make Wano the capital of a nation of pirates, and thus serves as a dark mirror for the world JoyBoy was trying to create. Much emphasis has recently been placed on the fact that Kaido believes himself to be the only one capable of changing the world, but apparently at some point he came to believe he wasn't the one fit to become JoyBoy. Perhaps the reason he selected Wano as the center of his territory is because the land of samurai was once the heart of JoyBoy's kingdom of pirates, and thus the return of JoyBoy signifies in part the arrival of one who will finish what JoyBoy could not, and reclaim Wano as the heart of a new pirate nation. This is something I touched on earlier in the discussion regarding the hero's shadow and character archetypes. I believe the return of JoyBoy signifies the arrival of someone who wants to transform the world as did JoyBoy. As Pirate King, JoyBoy was not an idle ruler. He built a network of people who desired freedom all over the world, and they banded together to actively effect change. We saw this very sentiment expressed in Kaido and Albert's first meeting on Punk Hazard. Kaido wanted to change the world. Luffy, Blackbeard, Kaido, Big Mom, and potentially even Law and Kid are rivals competing to not only succeed Roger as Pirate King, but to represent JoyBoy's return. After all, Roger's treasure is in truth JoyBoy's treasure. Like Big Mom, Kaido is a person who believes he's capable of changing the world, and indeed, that is exactly what the one who assumes JoyBoy's mantle must do to bring about the global new dawn. Kaido and Big Mom's respective visions for this coming new era vary dramatically, but importantly, neither are fit to be JoyBoy because the ideal projected futures they want to create by becoming Pirate King deviate from that which JoyBoy may have been trying to achieve. As shadows of the hero, elements of their dreams or ambitions are shades or dark mirrored reflections of that which JoyBoy hoped to accomplish, and this is by design. Because these characters represent the dark potential of what the hero in the mold of Luffy, Roger, or JoyBoy could become. Big Mom's dream in particular draws elements from the Libertalia myth, a pirate kingdom ruled over by an emperor of the sea in which people of all creeds, races, and religions can live in harmony. But Big Mom's utopian vision, taking inspiration from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, is warped into a twisted dystopian Candyland by Big Mom's critical flaw, the voracious appetite and deep-rooted emotional trauma which cause her to abuse her subjects. Her vision is pure, but corrupted by the cruel means she employs to get what she wants. Harmony isn't a virtue unless people choose it for themselves, which I believe the mythic sea dragon who created the Grand Line well understood. Kaido's attempt to build a pirate nation and start a global war similarly represent a distortion of JoyBoy's goals. As Whitebeard indicated, a war is coming, because the world's oppressors will not give up their power and cease their plans to further subjugate the One Piece world without a fight. Moral character and strength of will are important, but make no mistake, the forces Luffy and the Straw Hats need to face are also incredibly powerful. Kaido's mistake is in asserting strength as the paramount virtue, and as such, he wants to start and perpetuate a global war to create a world in which only the strong can live while the weak perish or submit. Anyone who submits admits their place in this pecking order.
Alright, maggots, listen up. Popo's about to teach you the pecking order.
And defers to the alpha at the top of the pack of beasts, is free to be part of Kaido's in-group, and challenge for dominance is constantly invited, with death completing a warrior's path. Kaido holds strength as the highest virtue and envisions a world where the entire society is structured around its supremacy. Kaido, like all of those vying for the title of Pirate King, aims to fundamentally transform the world. Villains who wear the mask of the shadow archetype most often view themselves as the hero of their own myth. As Kaido told Yamato, life isn't a series of simple questions with simple answers. His incursion of Wano and oppression of its people is viewed by Kaido as a necessary means to achieve what he believes to be a noble end, a world restored to its natural order where survival of the fittest rightly holds sway. From Kaido's point of view, the weak, like the celestial dragons, will no longer be able to unnaturally oppress the strong in his animal kingdom, as he says he believes this world of war would represent true equality. Where Big Mom overemphasizes the appearance of harmony at the expense of free will, Kaido overemphasizes strength at the expense of harmony or cooperation. We don't yet know exactly what Blackbeard hopes to accomplish, but at Marineford he declared the start of his era, indicating he too wishes to change the world by becoming Pirate King, and he proclaimed his territory on Pirate Island to be a pirate's paradise where his subjects can live freely, perhaps too freely. If Blackbeard's errant goals are also in part a dark reflection of JoyBoy's ambition to create a nation of pirates, then perhaps the trait he overemphasizes is unfettered freedom, most directly challenging Luffy's root desire to live as the person with the most freedom. Inheriting Xebec's will, Cheech's brand of piracy permits freedom to lie, cheat, murder, and steal, expression of personal freedom without any consideration for the unalienable rights of others. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness according to Thomas Jefferson, or life, liberty, and property according to John Locke. After all, as great as piracy might be in the world of One Piece, governments ostensibly exist for a reason, and should in theory serve to protect people's liberties. Unfortunately, as has often been the case throughout real-world history, the world government in One Piece and the oppressive regime by which it was preceded tilted toward tyranny, and thus piracy acts as a necessary counterbalancing force. But as the reigning emperors demonstrate, there is also an inherent danger in the pendulum swinging too far in the opposite direction. Teach, Big Mom, and Kaido are best described as filling the role of the shadow archetype, and thus we see in them the dark side of Luffy's ambition, the dark potential of changing the world in the way JoyBoy hoped to accomplish. Importantly, we can see that those in competition to take up JoyBoy's mantle all desire to become the Pirate King and want to change the world for what they believe to be the better. Remember, characters which occupy the shadow archetype are often the heroes of their own myth. This is why it's so important Luffy confront these particular villains in his approach to Laugh Tale. He must recognize the potential for both good and evil which are inherent to his quest. Taking up Roger and JoyBoy's mantle is a heavy burden and requires balancing competing interests. Big Mom, Kaido, and Blackbeard all seek to build a nation of pirates, represented in the very title Emperor, but their underlying visions are fundamentally corrupted by their tragic flaws. Luffy has slowly grown into an emperor himself, by declaring islands as part of his territory, becoming commodore of a massive 7-division fleet, and now by liberating the land which may have once been at the heart of JoyBoy's forgotten kingdom. When he eventually discovers One Piece and rises up to challenge the world, he will need to incorporate the positive qualities of his rival pirate emperors while rejecting the bad. Kaido asks Luffy what type of world he wants to create. Luffy replies that he wants to make a world where all of his friends have enough food to eat. Fitting with Luffy's character, Oda has consistently used food as a metaphor to demonstrate Luffy's maturation and growth into the hero the world demands. Goldie Roger, Odin, Rayleigh, Whitebeard, and others with some awareness of the world's lost history understood the true weight of what it means to take up JoyBoy's mantle, and the future Pirate King is going to play a pivotal role not only in beating up the bad guys who presently rule the world, but also in guiding the world toward a new dawn. Luffy is slowly maturing into the type of leader fit to lead such a revolution against the dark oppressive force which presently controls the One Piece world. This means that Luffy's desire to make the world a place where his friends don't go hungry is central to his motivation. It's what makes him a candidate to be JoyBoy. It's what makes him fit to become the Pirate King. Which makes me wonder just how closely this desire is tied to the yet-to-be-revealed dream that Luffy and Roger share. Returning to the topic of Wano's importance, during the Void Century, Wano's borders were opened, and thus Sea Stone could be exported to the world. Anyone who wanted to join this free nation could enter the Grand Line from anywhere on the sea as long as they possessed Sea Stone, representing harmony with the ocean's power. But the calm belts, like moats around a castle, served as barriers to keep out enemies of freedom. There are traces of JoyBoy's influence throughout the Grand Line because he tried to unite all those around the world in this endeavor. The proud Jolly Roger was flown by all who shared JoyBoy's vision, and Wano sat at the heart of this seafaring society. JoyBoy's kingdom was a pirate's paradise, a network of independent nations united in pursuit of freedom, working toward a certain end goal which was never achieved, to bring a new dawn to the entire world. We see this vision reflected in the very nomenclature of the Grand Line. The first half is called Paradise, a remnant of this pirate's paradise which once thrived, and the second half is called the New World because that's exactly what JoyBoy was trying to forge. Now, as great as this all might sound, the world was still imperfect in JoyBoy's era. The Grand Line was still parsed in two by the Red Line, a symbol of the world's oppression, and JoyBoy was unable to fulfill the promise he made to Shirahoshi's Poseidon predecessor. Though they made preparations, he was never able to bring her people to live under the light of the true sun. Zunisha committed an unnamed crime and was forced to begin its 8th century march. Wano's borders were forced closed, the city of Shandora was destroyed, and JoyBoy's crew disbanded, never to meet again. Though I first encountered the tale of Libertalia a long time ago, I was resistant to the idea that JoyBoy led a nation of pirates because it implied the 20 kings were unjust aggressors who banded together in an effort to stamp out a free nation of pirates and then blotted out history afterward to mask this heinous act. But this never quite matched with the nuanced way Oda writes conflict and structures his world. I was bothered by the fact that the Forgotten Kingdom, drawing inspiration from Libertalia, would present piracy as the paramount virtue. And while Luffy, Roger, and JoyBoy are presented as virtuous, they don't represent all pirates in the world. Piracy itself is morally neutral. These Straw Hats represent the good that piracy can accomplish in the One Piece world, but we have also seen the bad. Thus, one key detail has shifted my perspective on this matter, and it's in recognizing the potential reason JoyBoy's vision, this Forgotten Kingdom, was never realized. Just as Luffy must someday face Blackbeard, and Roger once faced Zebek, the man said to be his greatest foe, JoyBoy's vision was also likely once challenged by a primordial Morganeer, and perhaps this schism served as the catalyst for the 20 Kings alliance, with Imu acting as an instigator behind the scenes, manipulating both sides of this ancient conflict for personal gain. In any case, the war which resulted from JoyBoy's failed attempt to create a new world, the true nature of the world government and its enigmatic evil ruler, and the reason for JoyBoy's ultimate downfall are topics for another day. In the final verses of Banksaki, the upbeat melody is juxtaposed by the melancholy tale of friends forever parted. The sun set on JoyBoy's era, but he and his crew placed their faith in the inevitable arrival of a new dawn. Based on the inherent similarities between Luffy and Roger, I imagine JoyBoy was a person much in the same mold who embodied many of the same characteristics. On that note, we also know that in some form, just like Luffy, JoyBoy must have channeled the same power of the mythic warrior of liberation, sun god Nika. Both Zunisha and the Five Elders describe Luffy's awakening as the return of JoyBoy. For reasons I've previously outlined, I don't believe JoyBoy and Nika are one and the same. As Vegapunk noted, the name Nika is still recorded in some of the world's very oldest manuscripts, and we know recorded history in the One Piece world dates back at least as far as 5,000 years, which means the mythic being Nika, if he ever really existed, likely lived during the prior epoch, the Age of Heaven, or Tenreki, which ended 6 centuries before JoyBoy arrived on the scene. This likely means that JoyBoy was the previous wielder of Luffy's Devil Fruit. The Elder stated that Nika hasn't awakened in centuries, and has evaded their grasp ever since the end of the 100-Year Void, which implies that it was once awakened. We further know that Devil Fruit, particularly of the Zone variety, have a will of their own. Nika chose JoyBoy as its wielder during the Void Century, and has chosen Luffy in the modern era. We also have some recent evidence that lineage factors are somehow able to encode and pass down a person's lived experiences, which means that some aspect of JoyBoy's will may have been directly inherited by Luffy by consuming this same Devil Fruit 8 centuries later. Luffy was strongly averse to being directly tied down by a massive fleet, but eventually agreed to a mutually beneficial relationship wherein they could call on each other for help when needed. Importantly, however, the Straw Hats remain set apart as Luffy's inner circle, a core group of friends who travel together in pursuit of impossible dreams. Though the first Pirate King led a global coalition, I believe JoyBoy traveled with a core group of friends. He, of course, had connections and bonds with people throughout the Grand Line, and the relationship mirrored those the Straw Hats share with the nations they have protected throughout their voyage. When JoyBoy and his friends parted, knowing their time of adventure was at its end, they took the name D, which looks like a smile, or the half moon hidden behind the clouds, as a symbol to forever memorialize their friendship. JoyBoy's crew were much like the Roger Pirates and the Straw Hat Pirates, and those who carry the name D in the present are their descendants. The Ds were gathered from around the world, explaining how a giant like Saul could also carry this name. Among JoyBoy's crew there was a monkey, a Trafalgar, a gull, a Portgoss. I even wonder if there were 9 of them in total based on Toki's prophecy of 9 shadows cast by the moon someday bringing a new dawn. After all, the new dawn seems to have a double meaning for both Wano and the wider One Piece world. If I'm on the right track, this begs the question of which other characters could in fact be bearers of the Will of D. Of course, it's possible there are others yet to be introduced, but Law set the precedent for some Ds to keep their name hidden, and his other secret middle name Water also remains a mystery. Eustace Kid could be an interesting candidate, given that he, Luffy, and Law represent a sort of trio. Personally, I've always hoped that Robin's father could be a Henry Jones Sr. type of character, and that the two could have a joint adventure. For a time, I had even wondered if her father could be Dragon, though of course that seems rather unlikely, as interesting as it might be for Luffy and Robin to be half-siblings. That being said, I do still suspect Robin could be a bearer of the Will of D through her father. Robin has also taken particular interest in the mystery of the Ds, and as I've suggested, it would seem the Kozuki possess all the requisite character traits. I even wonder if they could be descended from JoyBoy himself. If my speculation is correct, that the straw hat kept in Emu's vault is a memento of JoyBoy, his seemingly vanquished foe, it's worth noting that based on the pattern on the walls in chapter 906, it seems there are 9 alcoves, perhaps each containing a talisman of some kind belonging to each member of JoyBoy's crew. Given that Odin, like Roger and Ace, smiled just before his death, I believe the Kozuki were also a core part of this group, and in that sense, I think there were likely analogs to many members of the Straw Hat Pirates aboard JoyBoy's ship. JoyBoy himself was the captain. Tom's ancestor who built Pluton was the shipwright. Their musician composed the song Banksaki, which Brooke introduced to readers 8 centuries later. The memory of their adventures, forgotten to the world, became nothing more than a legend, or a story.
You said memories become stories when we forget them. Maybe some of them become songs.
That'd be nice.
The end of JoyBoy's age coincided with the setting of the sun in the song Banksaki, yet his companions took heart knowing the moon would rise to guide adventurers through the approaching night. We see this very sentiment expressed in the stories and legends told by JoyBoy's closest allies all around the world, who together wait for this prophesied new dawn. Noah was unable to carry the people of Rigu Kingdom to the surface, but as the Sea King said, surely all will go well next time, and the fishmen hope to someday walk the path toward the sun. The clans of Wano, aside from the cursed Kurozumi clan, all have names which contain the word moon. In particular, the Kozuki, whose name means light moon, were responsible for creating the Poneglyphs. Sulong, the true form of the road poneglyph protecting minks, is only revealed under the light of the full moon. The ancient Shandorans once worshipped a solar deity, perhaps alluding to the mythic folk hero sun god Nika, and based on the lunar city Birka, they seem to have some direct connection to the moon. The winter solstice is celebrated on Elbaf to mark the death and rebirth of the sun, and indeed the sun died, or more accurately, faded from view at the end of JoyBoy's era. The world is thus now in a state of night, but the moon reflects the sun's light and thus symbolizes hope. As Pedro told Perospero, he named his crew Nox, meaning night, in recognition of the fact that there is no night which doesn't end in sunrise. Placing faith in a future sunrise also means accepting that the setting of the sun cannot be prevented. This willing embrace and acceptance of death in service of a higher ideal or purpose is reflective of the story's underlying mythic structure, and is also a recurrent motif seen in both those who carry the name D, who smiled just before death, and in the grinning skull, the Jolly Roger, which serves as the flag of piracy. No symbol could better represent what piracy means to the world of One Piece, and the attitudes of those like Luffy, Roger, and JoyBoy. We may then liken JoyBoy's era to the dissolution phase of the cosmogonic cycle. Whatever world preceded the Void Century dissolved from a waking state. The sun set on JoyBoy and his crew, and the world is now asleep. Those who pursue freedom like the Straw Hat Pirates are guided through the night by the moon, a reflection of the sun's light and impossible dreams. One day soon the world will again wake. The nightmarish incarnation of the shadow that is the world government and the devil which resides in secret on its throne will be abolished, and the world will witness a new dawn. As Campbell said, when our day has come for the victory of death, death closes in. There is nothing we can do except be crucified and resurrected, dismembered totally, and then reborn. Or as the song Banksaki says, doesn't matter who you are, someday you'll just be bones. But fear not, for the moon will rise, to guide the way in the night, and the sun will eventually return. Roger and JoyBoy both willingly accepted their fates. Roger realized he was too early and went to the execution platform smiling, knowing his successor would someday surpass him and complete that which he could not, and JoyBoy apparently did the same. He knew his era was coming to a close and recognized that history would be erased. He and his friends thus devised a system to preserve and protect the truth, trusting in the accuracy of these prophecies that someday someone will inherit their will. He even left a direct apology letter to the Mermaid Princess, indicating there was a period of time in which they realized their downfall was imminent, during which they could make provisions for the future. JoyBoy's kingdom of pirates was spread out across the Grand Line, and thus the Poneglyphs were entrusted to many nations spanning both halves of this legendary Sea of Dreams, like Alabasta, Shandora, Fishman Island, and Zo. The ancient weapons, which must someday be regathered to complete JoyBoy's vision, were also hidden away. It's here worth noting that both the Poneglyphs and the legendary treasure One Piece seem to be based on the tale of a real-world French pirate named Olivier Levasseur, who famously tossed a cryptogram from his execution scaffold and dared the world to decipher his final message in order to locate his treasure. Ultimately, no one was ever able to successfully locate Levasseur's treasure, but it seems Oda took inspiration from this tale. Like Levasseur, Goldie Roger, said to have attained everything this world has to offer, including wealth, fame, and fortune, dared the world to seek out his treasure named One Piece by the newspapers, and in so doing, initiated the current great age of piracy. Roger spoke his final words aloud to the crowd in Logtown, but because of the Void Sentry, JoyBoy was forced to engrave his last message in stone. The cryptogram portion of the story seems to have directly inspired the Poneglyphs, and thus it would make sense if this language was created by the forgotten first pirate king, as well as his allies. In the 8 centuries following the end of JoyBoy's era, the Road Poneglyphs have had a clear purpose in preserving the true history and in protecting One Piece. The ability to read this language was passed down among the Kozuki clan for centuries, thus necessitating their assistance for anyone who seeks to learn the history of the world and reach the final island. If JoyBoy himself created this language, it certainly seems possible he was himself a member of the Kozuki clan, though this is far from definitive. The 30 indestructible poneglyphs dispersed throughout the Grand Line appear to have been forged through some special process, as they are said to exude a strange energy. This could be indicative of some type of residual haki or willpower imbued into the stones. Interestingly, the ruins of Shandora are the only place we saw the poneglyphs used as the common language. These writings are seemingly distinct from the cube-shaped poneglyphs in that they were carved into ordinary stone walls. It's possible the poneglyphs, like Livasaur's cryptogram, were devised by JoyBoy as his era came to a close in order to preserve his final message. I suppose it's also possible this language, like One Piece itself, is much older. That the indestructible tablets are what's special, and that the language itself was once commonly used throughout JoyBoy's kingdom, as a sort of lingua franca, or a trade language used to unite people belonging to different societies from around the world. In any case, an important question which remains unanswered is how Laugh-Tale was originally mapped by those who created the poneglyphs. Roger told Whitebeard and Odin that when he and his crew arrived on Lodestar Island, the needle on their log pose went haywire and refused to point toward a new location. This erratic behavior revealed that there was one more island waiting on the horizon. According to Inu Urushi, it was on Lodestar that Roger somehow learned about the importance of the road poneglyphs and the civilization by which they were created. Importantly, in order for Laugh-Tale to be mapped, its location must have already been known to those who created the road poneglyphs. There are many possibilities here. Did the hand of fate guide them all the way to Laugh-Tale? Was instinct their only compass? Or did the Grand Line's creator somehow provide directions to the end of the line before the poneglyphs pointed the way? After all, as detailed earlier, based on Bink's Saki, it seems JoyBoy was also sailing toward the end of the sea during the Void Century, which potentially precedes the road poneglyphs. Or was Lodestar once the end of the sea? Did JoyBoy and his allies somehow create an even more secret final island to hide One Piece before the end of their age? This could explain why Lodestar, which is itself incredibly difficult to reach, seems to be the natural endpoint of the Grand Line. It may also explain the erratic behavior of the log pose if Laugh-Tale is in a location it wasn't meant to be, disturbing the natural electromagnetic signature of the region. Or maybe it was made from multiple islands, each with distinct magnetic signatures, confusing the log pose and preventing it from locking on to a new location. Another key event I sort of glossed over is Zunisha's Great Crime. We know it was once allied to JoyBoy during the Void Century, and accordingly both the Minks and Kozuki were likely members of JoyBoy's great nation. In an earlier video, I explained why I believe Otama's Kibi Kibi fruit may have been used to compel Zunisha's walk and to bind it to Momo's command as a penance. Visually, Zunisha's design takes inspiration from a 1948 painting by Spanish surrealist Salvador Dali, but its name and the land atop its back seem to be rooted in the world elephant concept from Hindu cosmology. The 4 or 8 world elephants are said to stand on the back of an even larger world turtle, which makes me wonder whether the fact that Zunisha walks the seas alone could be related to its great betrayal. It also makes me wonder if the missing world turtle is somehow related to Laugh-Tale. I also mentioned a potential traitor among the D's, and perhaps this is where Blackbeard and Zebek enter the picture. There's something strange about Blackbeard's body, and he's the only person who can consume more than one devil fruit, which, as we discussed, may originate with Emu. Moreover, according to Buggy, he seems to be cursed with the inability to sleep, which has some pretty significant implications given the thematic importance of dreams.
Haven't slept for a solid 83 hours, but yeah, I'm good.
Zebek's attack on God Valley indicates some greater awareness of the world's history without having read the Poneglyphs, and Teach is said to have an affinity for studying history, all of which suggests that perhaps the Judas, Brutus, or Benedict Arnold among JoyBoy's crew was cursed like Zunisha, and it's only by reconciling this centuries-old dispute that Luffy will be able to complete JoyBoy's quest. Perhaps Teach's ability to consume more than one devil fruit is also somehow related to his curse, if in fact the devil fruit were created or stolen by Emu. Perhaps this ability represents the 30 pieces of silver JoyBoy's betrayer received for selling out his captain. Impel Down, where Luffy and Blackbeard last crossed paths, is based on the Inferno by Dante, at the bottom level of which resides history's greatest traitors, including the devil himself. Yet perhaps Blackbeard's reliance on collecting devil fruit will also be his ultimate undoing, if consuming more than one fruit doubles the sea's curse. This is purely speculation, but we saw in Impel Down that Teach had a full row of teeth. This could very easily be an error, but Oda usually corrects such mistakes in the published Tankobon volumes. The fact that this was never altered suggests that it may have been deliberate, but there's no telling what this could mean. Teeth in dreams are often associated with death, so perhaps this is somehow related to Teach's curse. I speculated earlier that Blackbeard could somehow be carrying Zebek or even the primordial Morganeer who betrayed JoyBoy inside him as an alter ego, Professor Quirrell style, but there's no real evidence for this at this point, so I would say it's far more likely the will of this original traitor was simply passed down to Zebek and then to Blackbeard. Whatever the true nature of JoyBoy's Morganeer adversary may have been, his actions doomed the Forgotten Kingdom, and with its downfall came the end of the Void Century, also known as JoyBoy's era. 19 of the 20 kings gathered at the center of the world and descended to form the world government, but as indicated by the world's calendars, the Sea Circle has remained the dominant or ruling force for the past 8 centuries. The legend of a treasure at the end of the sea persisted and continued to guide adventurers in pursuit of impossible dreams for centuries, despite the government's efforts to prevent the One Piece from being rediscovered, until at last, 25 years before the present, Pirate King Goldie Roger successfully circumnavigated the globe and thus initiated the Great Era of Piracy. We recently learned that Vivi's ancestor, Nefeltari Lily, a member of the 20 kings who formed the world government, secretly carried the name D, which means that just as Vivi is a member of the Straw Hats, Lily was in truth a pirate, and member of JoyBoy's crew. The world government's been chasing Nika for 800 years, and Imu blames Lily for the dispersal of the Poneglyphs on a particular fateful day. I think this implies that much like Roger, JoyBoy willingly went to his death knowing that it would serve to preserve hope for the future. Imu may have emerged triumphant in the Void Century, but in the process, the seeds of his eventual destruction were scattered around the world. On the day of JoyBoy's execution, his final message was preserved with Lily's help, perhaps even using the power of Kuma's devil fruit. With JoyBoy's death, the Nika fruit escaped, and Lily somehow scattered the Poneglyphs to loyal friends and allies around the world, who have ever since protected the true history, ancient weapons, and the One Piece itself until JoyBoy's rightful successor, Monkey D. Luffy, at last arrives to inherit his will and complete his vision by delivering the world's new dawn. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a like. If you want to be notified when future videos are posted, please consider subscribing. It really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate your support. But most important, make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments.